Benjamin can have love for the truckie. Beautiful minds, but we love getting ugly. Risk takers with a clover, man, we love getting lucky. You run, we chase fire, I love when it ducks me. Tones go off, house watch, read the address out. 1075, get up off the magic couch. 500 gallons prepared for the baddest drought. Who else you want on the way when disaster's out? Can't even get a little bit rattled when you enter with exit apparel. Mayday, member down, they'll drag you. You won't get this from every Tom, Dick, and Harold, but here's a view from the top floor with Mickey Farrell.
What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of A View from the Top Floor. Today I want to talk about a recent fire I had. So those of you that do follow the social media, you know that I'm always constantly posting about lithium-ion battery fires. And I talk about a class that I have called Lithium-ion Battery Fires, Understanding a Modern Fire in a Tactical Sense, which I say it's tactically based from experience. So that said, I don't sit in any review boards, any panels, nothing to do with the UL. Everything that I've done in this class comes from a collection of firefighters and fire officers in the city where I work, where we're doing a tremendous amount of lithium-ion battery fires on the daily. And we've kind of collaborated these ideas, put them together, and bringing real-time info to you as far as the followers, but also the educational process of how the fire service seems to always be a reactive rather than proactive industry per se. And on the service side, we have to be ahead of that curve. And I think we fail ourselves quite often when it comes to being ahead of that curve. And for whatever reason, I feel even with the way things are transpiring with this, we're behind the eight ball. So I want to bring to light just about a recent fire I had involving a lithium-ion battery bike that was in a fireproof multiple dwelling, and how the steps we did in the moment are steps that aren't really written anywhere, that it's not tactically based, but they're tactics that we're developing in real time. So the run came in around lunchtime, the ticket for a phone alarm for smoke from the top floor of a fireproof multiple dwelling, a 14-story building. The caller was from across the street, so right off the bat, hearing that initial alarm, I'm thinking a compactor fire, right? So we turn the corner, people are pointing up, I get off the rig, and it was not a compactor fire. It was a fire one floor below the top floor, which would be the 13th floor of this fireproof multi-dwelling or project type building. Walking into the building, before we gave the signal, I wanted to make sure, I didn't want to over jump the gun on giving that signal, to make sure it wasn't rubbish, that we actually had a job. Looking up, I see a brown type of smoke pushing with extreme pressure out every window. The windows were still intact throughout the entire apartment, but the smoke was pushing rather like it had a volume or a velocity pushing around the window frames. However, it did not fail the window at that moment. Walking into the lobby, the first thing that we noticed was we had smoke in the lobby. It wasn't a tremendous amount of smoke, but it was enough to know that we had a fire. It was a very humid day, so the staff effect will push smoke down many times. But that said, the amount of smoke in that lobby, 13 stories down, was enough for me to start thinking or calculating, okay, the apartment door is probably open. So we recall the fireman service elevators. They come down, we enter the elevator. We take the elevators up to 2 floors below the fire floor. And on the way up, the smoke started filling the elevator car, which made me almost question, like, do we size this up properly? Because again, we didn't have an apartment or a floor. We sized that up from the outside, then gave the working fire transmission, and then went up to, we had to identify what apartment was on fire, and then confirm ultimately what floor when we got there. So going up in the elevator, the smoke was a little different than a normal like job smoke. Project smoke is it's a little different. It doesn't lift, obviously. Project fires are real shitty. It's a project, but this fire had a different kind of, not tempo, but a different kind of feel about it. Still not realizing we're dealing with a battery fire, but there were signs telling me that this wasn't just going to be an ordinary fire. So when we got out of the elevator, 2 floors below, there was a good smoke condition on the 2 floors below the fire. As we entered up to get to the fire floor, there was lights out conditions. When I say lights out, it wasn't lights out, but there was a good smoke condition on the fire floor, which ultimately I'm thinking again, okay, the apartment door is now open. So my main objective is to locate the fire department and control that door so we can get the line into place and move forward with this fire. When we found the apartment door, it was intact and it was closed. So that smoke was under pressure and it pushed around the frame of the apartment door on the fire floor. The humidity of the day pushed it all the way down to the lobby. But there was something different about this smoke. It had a metallic kind of taste in your mouth. Again, not that ordinary quote-unquote job smoke that we have. So, still not realizing that we had a lithium-ion battery fire involved, but still all the elements of this fire were coming together to be a little different than a normal job. We started to mask up. I tell my irons guy to go left. I'm taking the cam man to the right. I go in with the camera and pause. Try to locate what way to go, left or right. Where's the fire? See nothing. No high heat, just lights out condition. Real thick, shitty smoke. It was not lifting, it was not going anywhere. And it was a strange feeling because you have that much smoke and it was pushing around the frames on arrival. I'm thinking we have a good fire in this apartment, but we really couldn't locate the fire. So I bring the cam man down the hallway with me. The irons guy goes left. I get down to the end of the hallway. We have a bedroom, a bathroom. Find nothing. So I'm thinking, shit, it's the other way. So I go to retreat back to the other side of the apartment. My irons guy finds it in the living room area. Says we have an e-bike on fire. Now, this e-bike, the battery was in runaway. It failed. It exploded, but not with enough force to blow the windows out. So I always say that when you have heavy fire on arrival, especially around lunchtime on a normal sunny day in the summer, you got to start thinking that this isn't the norm. Especially in a project type building where the windows are usually closed, air conditioners are on. So fire out windows at one time was not one of those things that were commonplace as it was back with the modern day fires. With the legacy fires, getting into the modern day fires, thermal pane windows, that kind of began to change where fires were kind of snuffed themselves out. So that's exactly what happened. This battery failed. Everything in the room was on fire. It eventually burned itself out. So now we have this e-bike that's more or less smoldering like a small campfire would in the living room. But the smoke is still very, very thick, and there's a very, very little heat condition. It was a strange feeling. But at that moment, I realized, okay, moving this bike would not extend the fire throughout the apartment. So I often talk about, and if you've taken my class, we don't want to remove bikes from fireproof multiple dwellings into the public hallway. We want to try to isolate them into a room, preferably the bathroom if we can. And that's exactly what we did, but there's a fine line there. When you have devices that have not failed, that's a home run move. Get into the bathroom, close that door, into a bedroom, close that door, because if that bike or that device is thermally loaded and in runaway, it could fail at any moment while you're operating. So these bikes, or these batteries per se, are only at 140 degrees. They're vulnerable for runaway. Now think about that, 140 degrees to any fire. We're hitting those temperatures very, very quickly. That's no more than a typical hot yoga class. So getting back to the fire, we get that bike, and in the moment of making the hallway, when we found the bike, I went back with the hallway, made sure it was clean. Clean in the sense where it's not a clutter condition or a collier's mansion. I told my irons guy, this is what we're going to do. We're going to get this bike, we're going to drag it down the hallway and get it into the bathroom. Close the bathroom, isolate it, and then we'll get the engine into position. Now again, the fire had burnt itself in that room. If that room was on fire, this isn't a move that I plan on doing with an e-bike that's on fire or a room that's on fire, because now essentially we're just spreading the fire throughout the fire apartment. We want to contain that area. Once it's knocked down, then we can isolate that device and then submerge it into a tub. But before the engine committed, while they were stretching, I said, okay, let's get this bike, drag it down the hallway, and isolate it. What I learned in that moment is that timing is very, very important. So we made the move. I communicated with the engine officer and said, listen, we're going to move this device down to the hallway. Hold off a second. So having that communication between the truck officer and the engine officer become very, very crucial in the moment, because we don't want to commit that line to the fire department in the process of moving this bike, because then we have a roadblock or a road jam in the hallway of the apartment. And that can become very dangerous if that bike was to fail again. So getting the bike down to the area, communicating with the engine officer, telling them that we're getting it, we're isolating it, bring the line in, down the hall, fire straight ahead. And that's exactly what we did. Before we put it into a bathroom, though, something to think about while you're doing these moves, especially if you find one that's not on fire and you're going to just take one and kind of discard it into a room to isolate it, make sure you search that room prior to putting that device in it. Because when you do commit to doing that, you're now essentially cutting that room off from the search process. And also, when you're doing that, if there's a window in that room, say you put it into the bathroom, bathrooms have small windows. Try to get in there with your tool, take that window, then isolate the device. They say to submerge it, but during a fire, we don't really have time to be submerging anything. That's kind of the afterthought. Once the fire's knocked down, and then we can fill that tub up and submerge that device into the tub to pause that runaway per se. But it's still going to off-gas. So regardless if we submerge a device or not, it's still off-gassing. And that's why it's so critical that we take the window, if we have a window in that room that we're isolating, so that battery can still off-gas and vent out of the fire apartment. So doing our searches, when we go to give that search as negative to the command, is we have to be able to say that we confidently searched that area that we isolated. So we got the bike into position, engine went down, they flowed a large amount of water into that area. We went back and we collectively started to size up in the sense of how many cells are in there. And we very quickly realized we're dealing with an illegal battery lab, or an underground battery lab, which has become the norm. And maybe in a lot of the urban cities, especially New York City, battery labs are, they're all over. You may not realize it, but they're all over. At one time, we were always looking for SROs, or illegal occupancies, partitioned walls. These are things we've been looking at going into these apartments or onto building inspection. But today we actually have task force that are out there looking for these underground battery labs that are so incredibly deadly. That's exactly what caused this fire. So once we vented, things are getting better, conditions were lifting. The smoke was having a really, really hard time venting out of this apartment. But once we did get it out and vented, I realized that we have multiple batteries and devices that were in that room. However, they all didn't fail, but they were all off-gassing in that moment. So that kind of changed the game as far as overhaul, right? So we don't want to be overhauling. Again, we're in a fireproof building, so we're not necessarily pulling lath and plaster and all this shit down on top of it, but we are going to overhaul that room. So it's very, very important that before we start covering these cells, we search the area for these cells, because this is how overhaul's kind of changing, in the sense where we're not just going in and destroying a room right away. When I say destroying, we're opening up, checking for fire extension. We have to hold off on that moment until we gather the cells, which is very, very important. So we did just that, and we still followed the traditions and the pride and brotherhood of what the fire service is about by trimming all the windows, but we're doing it on air this time, because again, all these cells are off-gassing. This becomes a hazmat incident now, so now you're going to get special operations into the fire department. So my advice to any company officer out there is don't fight these guys coming into your fire apartment, because now it's a hazmat run. And we did what we did. We put the fire out. We did our searches. Everything went very, very well. But now let these guys come in, overpack the batteries, do what they have to do. And almost like turning over the crime scene to a different company. It's really hard to turn over their fire department to anybody, but especially someone that, when you, in the world of how we kind of work and do our things, there's a lot of pride, and that's your fire department, your fire building. But that moment, it's now become theirs, because it's a different type of fire we're fighting. But some takeaways from that fire were definitely timing. We have to communicate timing. And if the room is on fire, including with the bike, don't necessarily be so quick to isolate that bike. Extinguish the fire. When the fire is extinguished, then we will isolate the device that caused the fire, or in the moment of us searching, that's when we can take a device and isolate it during the fire if that device was not involved with the fire. I make that very clear. So don't be dragging around bikes on fire throughout the apartment to try to isolate it. Extinguish the fire first. Then we submerge it and isolate it into a room. Submerging comes after, not during the fire process, unless he was taking a bath in there one day and there happened to be a fire, and then you're in luck. You throw it in the tub, but that's reality, not going to happen. Communication with timing, so important, like I said, and searching that area of isolation before you isolate any device. Incredibly important, because now when you go to give the report to command, or the command prompts you, hey, ladder one, how you making out up there in those searches? You can't go back and say, Chief, searches are negative in the fire department until you thoroughly checked that area of refuge or that area of isolation where you might have put that device. That's something that was a takeaway for me that was very, very critical. And if we're isolating into a small bathroom area, you want to take that room. Now, or take that window in the room. I don't know how I feel about taking a window in a bedroom per se and then isolating it so it off gases before we get water in the fire. I'm not saying do that. I'm not really a component of that. But I think that if we can get it into the bathroom and we can secure that door relatively secure enough where we're not going to change the flow path, take that window as an off gas, because it's a really, really small compartment. Any window in a project or fireproof type building, or any city building for that matter, they're very, very small. So that off gassing can become a very, very large hazard. Could be more explosive. We want to vent that area and let those gases vent out of the fire department. So circling back, I'm not necessarily thinking we should get a device into a bedroom if that's all you could find and take those windows. Don't do that until we have water on the fire, obviously. That's firefighting 101. So again, lithium-ion battery fires, we're not necessarily changing how we do tactics, but we just have to be more not creative, but we have to pay attention to the details in the moment. Slowing down a little bit, but not changing how we search, just forward thinking or mind mapping what we're doing. At one time, if you work in a colder area in the Northeast, you're searching for radiators, right? What's that give you? It's a way out. That's forward thinking, that's mind mapping. Today, I'm searching for devices that can be thermally loaded, remote from the actual fire room. Those are the devices that we have to actually secure. Do not put them in the public hallway. Even if the bike is right inside the door or the device right inside the apartment door, do not drag it out and put it into the public hallway. If you can get in another apartment, possibly, that could be the move, especially if you have a cluttered condition. Too many guys operating in the fire department and you can't make that move, but you want to isolate a device. Maybe force the door to the adjoining apartment, get it in there, isolate it into that bathroom, possibly. You can submerge it there. And that could be a company that's not actively fighting the fire per se, standing by on the fire for maybe the secondary truck could do that move. That's a great move. However, we don't want to remove that into the public hallway and just leave it in case it does fail. Because when they do fail, as we know, they're very, very violent. It's like a bomb going off. So just wanted to go ahead and go over that. Listen, there's a lot of good training out there. Again, the UL is doing a ton of studies, and I'm not anti-UL like some people like to say. I just think that the tactical side of things can come from the UL, and the UL never said that they're trying to develop tactics for us, but it's for us to take away of how severe these fires can be. The studies the UL are doing are tremendous, but we have to understand what we're doing in real time. And there's nobody on any advisory board or panel that's talking about the tactical side of what we're doing and how we're not necessarily changing tactics. We're just looking at things with a little bit more detail. So be very, very careful in the training that you're doing with lithium-ion battery, the people that are training you and their experience level. I'm not saying I've been to 1 million fires of batteries, but what I'm saying is that my collective board of firefighters and fire officers that we've developed together, we go over these fires every day. We talk about it every day. We have a group chat going every day talking about throwing around ideas. This is what I saw in my fire. Oh, I had that last week at this fire. And we're comparing notes. And that's a lot of where this is coming from. So don't be so quick just to go to any training and take it with such the power of word per se, right? So let's talk about the power of word real quick. With training-based knowledge through data and experience, we have to be careful because the power of word is very important. So vet where you're getting your information from and the experience level versus the research and data. Two very, very different things. They go hand in hand. They do. They parallel the fire service, and it's very important that we understand how they do parallel, but we can't allow those parallel lines to cross when they're not dialed in or honest per se of what each stands for. Experience with this, I feel, moving forward is as the only way we can be proactive is going to them, learning from them, and then taking a reactive look on things. But it's going to be a fine line, or it's going to be a matter of time before we get severely hurt at one of these fires, and then we're going to start taking a reactive mode on tactics. So let's stay ahead of the curve. Let's be smart. Let's look at things not differently, but with a little bit more detail, and understand that these fires are dangerous and they're very, very real. We're going to these fires every single day, multiple times a day. And it's not just a big urban city problem, because you're seeing in the news throughout the world that small towns all over the world are having these fires. So if you're sitting back listening to this thinking, well, this is good information, but it's not going to happen here. We have a population of 500 in my town. Well, I promise you that it's going to cross your path the next couple of years. You're going to go to one of these fires. I'm not going to say it's be blowing out 5 windows on the top floor of a tenement, but it could be a small ranch. It could be a mobile home fire. But you're going to go to a fire involving a lithium-ion battery, and understand that they're very, very dangerous. All right, guys, that's all I got for you today's episode. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you got something out of it. I think it's a good kitchen table drill just to kind of go over and talk about what's happening. I've been drilling on this fire for the past couple of days now, and I think we're getting something out of it. The main thing is having awareness of what's around us, paying attention to the details. And again, I want to stress that if we have a device that's on fire in a room that's on fire, don't drag that device throughout the fire department, spreading that fire. Extinguish the fire. Then we want to submerge it into that room, into the bathroom, and then isolate that door, take the window before we do that. Timing is very critical. We want to make sure we're timing everything, communicating with the engine, and letting command structure know that, okay, Chief, we have a lithium-ion battery fire, and that'll get Hazmat on the road. That'll get whoever else, whatever your department has for coming in and dealing with these overpacking issues. But again, it goes from a fire incident to now a Hazmat incident, and we have to be able to make that shift and pivot in the moment. So that's all I got. If you'd like me to come in and do my class, please let me know. You can reach me on the website. The full class description on batteries is there. Again, tactical based class. All right. Thanks again, and I'll talk to you guys soon.